everybody, and welcome back to Breakdown Conversations, a YouTube channel where I have conversations around education. I have been a teacher all of my life, and education fascinates me. And along this journey of mine, I have met so many and interesting and inspiring people. And so I decided to document my conversations with them here so that you too can hear their stories and the amazing work that they do. I'm here today with Swathi Vellal. She's another classmate of mine. We did our MA in Special and Inclusive Education together. And more importantly, she's the founder, director of Ishanya India Foundation, a center for individuals with special needs. So I'm going to leave it to Swathi to tell us more about Ishanya and about her journey and how she came to start Ishanya.
Sure, Anupa. Thank you so much for having me. I will try and keep it short. Anupa, I think I believe that our paths to finding purpose can be shaped by early childhood experiences. So I think a lot of experiences that I had in childhood led me to what I'm doing today. Thanks to my father, he is, the founder member of another organization. It's an NGO. They used to have an orphanage at that point, not anymore. They also worked with children who are at the dropout stage from schools, with a lot of people with visual impairment. So I spent most of my summers there, with children and, just doing activities with them and all of that. And of course, in school, I was part of Bala Janagraha, and I honestly didn't know what I was doing back then. But then now when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, we did such important work, and, you just feel good about it. And, I think I was in 4th grade. As I speak this, I realize I've never spoken about this in any public forum, but this incident really changed a lot of things. My perspective in life and the things that I'm doing today. I think I was in 4th grade and I was sent to a summer camp. It was a very different kind of a summer camp, which looked at inculcating spirituality in young children. So we were introduced to like meditation practices, chanting and all of that. And I was going because my friends were going as well. And I'm like, okay, let's just go have fun. And it was a residential program. First day went great. Second day, at the end of the day, so we were all divided into different groups, and I was part of a small group, and 3 of us were called, and we were told that there's a lady on the 2nd floor, just go hand over, her dinner to her. And I said, okay, what's the big deal? And, we went to the dining area, we served dinner, and we went up. It was the 3 of us. There was another girl holding the plate, and I was just going along with her. And there was another girl with, with a water bottle. So we went up, and we could see a lady inside this room through the window. And we knocked on the door, and no response. We knocked again, no response, and we realized that the door was not locked. So we decided to go in. We went in and we handed over the dinner to her, and we don't know what happened, what triggered. She was furious. She just flipped, she, moved the chair and tried to push the table and sort of tried to attack us. And the next thing I remembered, I'm just screaming and running. Right? And we were stopped by one of the organizers to find out, hey, what happened? Why are you girls, running away? And, we just narrated what happened. And in Kannada, she said, "Avadu huಚ್ಚಿ avadu ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾಳೆ?" Meaning she's a mad woman. What can she do? And, that just made me think of, why that lady was there and what happened. Of course, later life happened, you move on. But I keep going back to that because, I keep thinking, why was she there? What is her story? And because I got into the field of clinical psychology later on, and I do understand mental illness and the kind of labeling we do. And she was called a huchi, right? A mad woman. So I keep going back to that. I don't know what happened to her. But I feel like, that really intrigued me to know more about mental illness. And of course, later, like I mentioned, did my honors in psychology and then clinical psychology. So that's how it started. But also what happened in my bachelor's when I was doing my psychology honors was I took up an elective on childhood disorders, and it was very interesting, very, very fascinating. And that's when I first heard the name autism as well. And I decided to use my semester break to volunteer somewhere. I went to a school, a special school, and the principal was very, very sweet. She said, please come, just feel at home, see what you can do. And I was placed in a classroom where children with multiple disabilities were there. There were children with autism, there were children with intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, etc. I was very fascinated with one boy who was making a lot of verbal stim, right? And the teacher, the class teacher, realized that I was paying extra attention to him, and she said, okay, you know what, come sit with him. Why don't you do some activities with him? And I decided to, do some art activities with him. And I didn't realize I kept touching him. And after a few minutes, I got a nice lap. It was on my birthday also, right? And I'm like, wow, I've got a nice gift. So I tell everyone how my journey with autism started with a nice lap. So later I was told that this boy has autism and also has a lot of sensory issues. And it was not a good idea to, touch him that much. He's very sensitive to touch. And so obviously I was, more interested. I started reading up, and that's how it continued. And I did my master's in clinical psychology, and mostly you get to intern in hospital settings. So that's what happened with me. I was in a hospital setup along with the clinical psychologist, basically administering a lot of assessment tools, from IQ assessments to diagnostic rating scales, etc. And we would write like really lengthy reports. Initially, it was amazing. I loved what I was doing, even post the graduation as well. But then later it hit me that, we're writing all these recommendations. So what next? Like, is it being useful? What is happening? Because parents don't really come back to a hospital setup, right? Unless they want to meet the psychiatrist. That's when I remember having this discussion with the psychiatrist who was the director of the hospital. And he said, these kind of things bother you so much. Why are you in the hospital setup? You need to be on the other side, work with these children, follow through your recommendations that you've written for them. So he pushed me. And I think if not for that push, right, I would have ended up doing something else and not this. And I'm so glad this happened. He really pushed me. He connected me to someone in Autism Society of India. We did some amazing projects there. I got to work with diverse group of children across different age groups, people from different parts of India. We traveled, we did a lot of workshops, and it was around the same time that SAP was piloting their Autism at Work project. So I also worked as a job coach. So I got to work from early childhood experiences to employment. And that's what we do today at Ishanya as well. So we run programs 5+ onwards, and we don't have an upper cap. I think our oldest one is about 35, 36. So we have programs all the way up till employment, and we do provide post-placement support as well.
Wow, Swathi, that is so amazing. I don't think any of us were so aware of what the experiences that we were going through. And it's amazing that you actually learned from, what you went through, right from school through college. And that's also very encouraging, because I'm constantly telling teachers, the experiences that we give our students is going to impact them for life. So this is like a very inspiring story. And I love that you asked the question, what's next? That's so important to know what's going to happen next. So Swathi, moving on, thank you so much for sharing your story. I saw a post on LinkedIn where you spoke about neurodiversity and inclusion in the workplace and things like that. So can you start off by telling all of us lay people about what exactly neurodiversity is?
Sure, Anupa. So every time I talk about neurodiversity, right, I go back to this blog written by a mother who has a child on the spectrum, and she wanted to create this awareness program in the son's classroom. So she says, let's think about brain as a machine, and, brain controls everything that you do, and it does things that you don't even think about, like blinking, right? Brain automatically does it for you. So it's the same thing for people with autism as well. They use their brain for everything. Now, we understand that, brain is made of tissues and neurons and nerve cells. And let's pretend instead of that brain was made of very simple things like metal and plastic and electrical wires. And let's pretend that when you put this whole thing together, it turns into a toaster, right? So we all have toaster brains. And in our world, most people have toaster brains, and we've decided that it's very, very valuable for each and every person to make a toast. Now, let's pretend that an autistic person's brain is also made of metal and plastic and electrical wires. But when his parts get put together, it turns into a totally different kind of a machine. So instead of a toaster, it turns into a hair dryer. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with a hair dryer, right? We need hair dryer. But can you make a toast with a hair dryer? You can't, right? No matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, it's just going to be really difficult to make a toast using a hair dryer. But when we toaster brain people, when we want to dry our hair, we would really hope that the autistic person and his hair dryer brain are around. So it's the same thing, in the real world with our real brains that are made of tissues and neurons and the gray matter. Because for most of us, I think, when that important stuff gets put together, we have a certain type of brain, and we've created a society that says that the most important things are the things that we are really good at. It could be verbal communication, it could be making friends, it could be spending time with people, it could be doing different kinds of things and having different kinds of experiences and trying new things. Because our brains are really good at those things, we try and spend most of our time doing that. But because of autism, the autistic person's brain has a really hard time doing that. And that's how she ends the blog by telling, it's high time that we embrace neurodiversity, because neurodiversity from the that perspective, developmental disorders are actually normal variations in the brain, and these are not deficits. So how there are neurological differences in the brain, you just appreciate the differences and not really look at the deficits. But then I keep thinking about it, and I realize that human world, right, it's just created for the majority. Maybe it does make practical sense, but then if you're not like the majority in some or all aspects, then it's just going to be really hard for you to adapt to this world. And when you talk about being normal, Anupa, we're simply talking about the largest part of the bell curve, the percentage into which the greatest number fit. But then what a lot of times we don't realize is that at some point we can become the outliers, and we may be called different and whatever labels, right? So the whole neurodiversity movement, I think what it calls for is just accepting the differences and not really look at this as a deficit. So what we do at Ishanya as well is we've taken our inspiration from the neurodiversity movement to see how we can identify the strengths the students have. What happens is right from childhood, right? All the therapies that we do with children, it's only looking at deficit. Oh, he can't verbally communicate. He can't do this. He can't do that. And we're trying to change that through therapies. But then what this movement calls for is that's fine. You work on the difficulties, but then what about the strengths? Identification of strengths. How do you identify? How do you utilize that? And what we've seen in our experience is the moment individuals start identifying their strengths and we use those strengths, then they can capitalize on that to manage their other difficulties. And that's when you don't really, it doesn't affect their self-esteem then. And that's important, right? I mean, for any human being, whether you have a disability or not, self-esteem matters. And a lot of times therapies don't really cater to that. So that is something that we are very consciously doing. It's not always a success because, all the stakeholders need to come together. And just to give you an example, one common argument I have with parents is they keep insisting that the child has to make an eye contact while communicating. And I'm like, why? It's not important. Why does he need to make an eye contact? And I've tried explaining parents in multiple ways. I've tried showing articles written by, people with autism who are able to verbalize and tell people why it's difficult to make an eye contact. It could be because, they're unable to comprehend what you're telling them. It could be because, it's just really difficult to observe the eye movements and all of that. So this is a common argument. I tell them it's okay if he doesn't make an eye contact. Don't worry about it as long as the task gets completed, as long as he's able to manage communication in whatever ways possible. And another, argument or a discussion that we commonly have with parents is about verbal communication. And where we try and tell them that it's okay that if verbal communication can't happen, we can figure out other ways. There's technology available today, and we have to use that. And one example that we have, right, is we started working with a girl on the spectrum. I think she was about 13, 14. This was in just before the pandemic, in fact. And she was very, very reluctant to even enter our building. There was a lot of, anxiety and just the transition from the car to the center and all of that. It took us some time, and finally she started coming inside, and we would do some really basic work with her, Anupa. Like it could be like CVC words, and it's teaching like patterns and very simple things like that. And she was a girl who didn't have verbal speech, verbal communication. She was non-verbal, and we were trying to figure out how to get her to communicate with us. So I don't think parents had tried PECS, the picture exchange communication system, or a few other things. I think they had tried the traditional speech therapy for some time. Nothing much happened. And we were like, okay, let's try with picture exchange communication system and see if, that will make a difference. And soon we started her on an app called Avaz. And it took us some time to get her to understand how, Avaz works. But, once she understood how this can be used to communicate, oh my God, I can't tell you how she made progress. And right now she is writing a storybook. It's a book on, short stories, and we're hoping to publish that soon. Just a simple, technology, just a simple tool made a lot of difference to her. So this is what we talk, this is the example we give parents when we tell them it's okay that, he or she can't do verbal communication. There are alternatives, and we can use that, and we try and normalize that as well.
I love how you explained neurodiversity and everything. I think you have given us so much of information in this short conversation. And Swathi, I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing so much of wisdom and knowledge with us. And I, for one, I'm going to start having more conversations around neurodiversity, because really, like you said, it does not have to apply to only kids or adults on the spectrum, but it's for all of us, right? And so more power to you as you go further with Ishanya. I see how amazing your work is and all that you're achieving. So all the best, Swathi, and thank you once again.
Thanks, Anupa. Thank you so much.
Bye.
See you.